So we have a major escalation in the Benson case where the DC Appellate Court struck down the district's ban on magazines. That ruling was already one of the most important Second Amendment rulings that we've seen recently, and the district's attempt to immediately block those rulings and that impact has recently been denied. But now this fight is getting a lot bigger. We have 18 states across the country who have now stepped in and filed a joint amicus brief asking for the court here to rehear the case en banc and overturn that ruling. And now on top of that, all of the major gun control groups have also filed their own amicus brief supporting the district's ban on magazines. So now this is a coordinated push by both states and anti-gun groups to try to stop this ruling and the impact of this ruling from spreading. So let's break down what is now happening in this critical case. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to subscribe. You can also click the like button that just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content, and so it shares it with more people. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to give you as much as possible as a member. So if you're interested, if you want to check out what they offer, you can look at them using the links down below. And if you decide to sign up and you use my code ARMEDSCHOLAR, you can get $25 off of your signup fee. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing a critical magazine ban challenge that is impacting a lot of other cases across the country. So first, let's quickly recap what happened in this Benson case out of Washington, DC, because that is critical for understanding where this case is now heading. So as you may recall, the DC Court of Appeals ruled that the district's ban on magazines that holds more than 10 rounds does in fact violate the Second Amendment. Not only did the court strike down the magazine ban itself, but it also vacated several of Benson's related firearms convictions. The court also said that those convictions were infected by the unconstitutional magazine ban and therefore could not stand. So that was a sweeping ruling with potentially massive implications. Now, ever since that ruling and ever since that came down, DC has been trying to contain the impact of that case. Recently, we discussed how the district attempted to get expedited review of this case, expedited rehearing en banc, and they also asked the court there to suspend the precedential status of that ruling. However, the court recently denied both of those motions. That meant that the ruling remains binding right now while the court decides if they want to rehear this case en banc. But DC is still trying to move quickly to overturn the ruling because they understand the impact of that case and the ruling here in this case and maybe how it's going to impact other issues going forward. And now, like I mentioned, you have 18 states, many of which also have their own magazine bans, who have taken notice of this ruling and are moving fast to support DC in their attempt to reverse that ruling. A group of states have filed an amicus brief supporting the en banc review, urging the full court to take the case and reverse that panel ruling. Their main position is that the Benson ruling and that decision is wrong and it threatens their own state magazine ban. So they don't want this to stand because they're worried about it maybe also trickling in and impacting some of the cases that are going against their own state magazine bans. But now we have another major escalation in this case. Multiple anti-gun groups, including organizations like Everytown, Brady, and Giffords, have also filed an amicus brief supporting a rehearing en banc. And their arguments go even further than these states in some key areas. They are not just saying that the ruling here is wrong, they are also arguing that the court's reasoning itself is dangerous and could reshape Second Amendment law in a way that puts public safety at risk. Both these states and these groups heavily attack the common use analysis used in Benson, but the advocacy groups take a more aggressive position. They argue that the court made a fundamental mistake by treating ownership numbers alone as the test for constitutional protections. According to their brief, relying on how many own something creates what they call a popularity test for constitutional rights, and they warn that this approach could lead to dangerous outcomes where weapons gain protection simply because they become widespread and commonly used. They argue that common use must focus on use for self-defense alone, not just mere ownership statistics. The anti-gun groups also heavily emphasize public safety. They argue that these magazines are extraordinarily lethal, that they increase casualties during shootings, and that they are heavily used for high-profile shootings, and they cite some studies and some prior court rulings claiming that incidents involving these magazines result in significantly higher numbers and injuries. And, that's why they need to be banned, because they're just so dangerous for the public at large. There's going to be so much chaos, and therefore these magazine bans need to be, upheld, and these restrictions need to stay in place. They then also warned that if Benson and that ruling stands, these magazines could flood into jurisdictions like DC, which they say creates chaos and public safety risks. Another key argument that they make is that the court's reasoning reduces the Second Amendment to what they describe as a counting exercise. They argue that constitutional rights do not expand or contract based on market trends, consumer demand, or how many items are sold. They believe that allowing popularity alone to determine protections would create absurd consequences, they claim. Now, here's where the anti-gun group's argument really is focused. They warn that Benson's ruling doesn't just affect magazines. They argue that it can be used to challenge assault weapon bans, machine gun restrictions, and other firearms regulations nationwide. They even point out that the litigants are already citing Benson in other cases across the country. So their message to the court here is that if this ruling stands, it will have immediate and widespread consequences. And of course, they don't want that, and they want to contain this ruling. But for us, we want this to be upheld, and this ruling should impact all these other cases, because assault weapon bans, magazine bans, and all these other statewide restrictions are clearly unconstitutional. This is significant for one simple reason. You are now seeing alignment between multi-anti-gun states and anti-gun groups, and that tells you how much pressure this ruling is really putting on these existing gun control laws. Because Benson is no longer just influencing this one area and this one case, it's already being cited in Duncan, which deals with California's magazine ban, and that's in front of the Supreme Court. It's impacting the Cheeseman case, which deals with New Jersey's rifle and magazine bans. That's in the Third Circuit. And then also the Pica, Illinois bans, which is currently in the Seventh Circuit. And now you have multiple anti-gun groups trying to contain this ruling before it spreads even further. So the Benson case just took another major step. It's no longer just about DC alone. It's now a coordinated effort by some anti-gun states and then national gun control groups trying to overturn this ruling that threatens firearms regulations across the country, which this is a good sign because it shows how worried they actually are about this ruling. And now this court has to decide whether it's going to let that decision stand or take the case en banc and potentially reverse it. So that's the latest update in this Benson case. As soon as we get more information, I will let you guys know. I also want to mention that we still have the night vision giveaway going on with Fan of Them. In a prior video, I mentioned that is still open. It's going to run until 5/2 at 11:59 Pacific Standard Time. So you obviously still have time to enter into that. It's an awesome thing. You can win. I will leave links down below in the details section, also in the pinned comment, if you want to check that out. But again, we are giving away a set of night vision goggles. So check that out if you're interested using the links down below. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.